Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm a child of divorce. In this video, I'm going to walk you through an exercise where you can consider how your parents' breakup impacted not just your immediate family, but the support structure that surrounded you as a child. Now, we all know that children and teens are vulnerable. They need protection, they need guidance, they need support. In an ideal world, this comes from your parents, but also from the extended family and the community that surrounds you and keeps you safe, protecting you from the dangers of life, providing a bit of a greenhouse for you where you can grow, where you're safe and protected, where you can be nourished, where you can discover things, and you can be prepared to go out into the big wide world around you. When you think about trees and gardens and gardeners, we know that gardeners will stake up a sapling or a plant that needs support, putting something strong and sturdy next to it, attaching it somehow. A sapling doesn't need to be staked up forever, because as it is being staked up and supported, it's putting roots deep into the soil to provide the stability that the tree needs to grow and flourish. I've heard it explained that the root system supporting a tree will be as deep and as wide under the ground as the tree is tall and wide above ground. Even though we can't see the roots and support structure of a tree, we know how vital it is to the health of a tree. When the roots are damaged or attacked or diseased somehow, it can really impact the tree. In the same way, children and teens who are experiencing the divorce or breakup of their parents will suffer when the support network that has held them up and protected them is taken away or damaged or changed. For this exercise, you're going to create two diagrams. Now, it doesn't matter what they look like. The goal is not artistic ability here. I've just used a sketch diagram with a pen. You can be creative and embellish it as much as you like, but it's totally fine to just use a line diagram. So you're going to draw one diagram looking at the roots of your life. So imagining that you are the tree and the roots underground are the support systems that provided stability, connection, nourishment to you in your early years. And you're going to think about your life before your parents' breakup, if you can remember that. And you're going to make one diagram listing the roots, the relationships that were important to you, the people that were significant, involved in your life. Then you're going to make a second diagram, imagining the time in your life after your parents broke up. So for me, I sort of imagined about a year down the road, because it took about that much time for our life to kind of get into a new rhythm and routine. And of course, if your parents remarried and divorced again, or if you moved, if there were significant changes in your living situation and in your relationships, you can make a third diagram or a fourth, as many as you find helpful. You may want to start this exercise by simply making a list of the significant relationships in your life before your parents broke up. So you could start with each of your parents and your siblings. You could look at your mom's extended family, your dad's extended family, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, your cousins, and so on. Next, you can think about the people who lived around you, your neighbors. Were there kids you played with down the street? Was there a neighbor who watched you after school? Families that you went on holidays with or had picnics with, did activities with? Then what about school friends? Teachers, coaches, tutors, piano teachers, family friends, friends from hobbies or sports, so the soccer team or dance class, or there may be people from church or from daycare. So there may be individual people that you want to name: Gina, Matthew, the Brown family, Mrs. Archibald, or it might be a collective group like the soccer team or the ladies at the library or the knitting club. Once you make your list, then you're gonna start your diagram, and you're gonna imagine yourself as the trunk of the tree and the people that you've listed as the roots that are providing support for you. Start with the relationships that are most important to you. That could be your mom and your dad. What you're gonna do then is you're going to draw them as a root. Now, the longer and the more supportive or significant of an impact they had in your life, the deeper and thicker they will be represented by the root. So I'm gonna pause the camera now, and you can work on that, and we'll come back together and move on to the second exercise. Okay, so this is my beginning of my diagram here. So this is me as the tree trunk, and then these are the first two roots, my mom and my dad. And definitely in those early years, my mom was a much more influential person in my life. now I'm going to go on and I'm going to add my grandparents, my aunts and uncles and cousins. They were a big part of my life, especially in those early years. Okay, so now I've added relatives, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins on both sides. Move on and add people from church, neighbors, and some friends from school. Okay, so now I've added some things from school, neighbors, some more friends from church that got more connected in our lives, an aunt who was really involved in my life. Okay, so you can keep working on this as much as you like, getting as specific as you like, and a lot will depend, of course, on how old you were when your parents broke up. I was 10 years old, so really it was my mom's family, my dad's family, our neighbors, our friends from church, our friends from school, and that was pretty much it. Okay, and at this point, you may want to pause for a bit and simply look at your diagram and consider maybe some of those moments that you shared with the different people. What was it like to get together for holidays or birthdays or Christmas? When I was a kid, we would often have friends over for Canada Day because our backyard was right onto the park where the fireworks were. And so that was a time when we really felt connected. It was something we really looked forward to, and we had a lot of social interaction and fun. Other times that I really have very fond memories of would be summer camp together, our Christmas program at church, and usually for a week or two every summer I would go spend the week with one of my aunties. So think through what that season of your life was like, if you remember, what you remember from that time. And you can ask yourself, who did you feel close to? What did you enjoy doing? How did you feel when you spent time with those relatives or friends or neighbors? You could think about what you learned from the different people in your life. Did you have an aunt who taught you how to cook, or an uncle who took you fishing, or a neighbor who taught you how to ride a bike or hit a baseball? Okay, so once you feel good about how far you've got with that diagram, then I invite you to get a new piece of paper and repeat the same thing. But this time, fast forwarding to the time in your life after your parents broke up. So for myself, I'm gonna draw probably a year or so afterwards, because it did take about that long for us to get into a new rhythm. And you might want to use the first diagram as a reference and adjust your diagram for what life was like after the breakup. If you want, you can start with the exact same list of people. So I'm gonna start with my mom and my dad. Mom's family and my dad's family, then consider friends from school, church, neighbors, and so on. And what this exercise is doing is it's helping you to visualize and to acknowledge that there were relationships that changed after the breakup. Some of the relationships changed because of logistics. You were living in a different city, going to a different school, attending a different church. Some of the relationships ended because of relational tension. Maybe your grandparents weren't talking to your dad anymore and you didn't see them as much. Perhaps you withdrew from some of your friendships or activities because you didn't want to be involved anymore. You were dealing with other issues. You were too tired or stressed or angry. So none of these reasons are right or wrong, and they're nothing to be ashamed of. This exercise is an exercise in awareness and understanding. You don't have to show it to anybody. It's for you and for your understanding and your processing. Okay, so here's my second diagram. After divorce, here's me in the tree again, and I'm going to start with my mom and my dad. So when my parents broke up, my dad got custody, and we only saw our mom twice a month. So that was a huge change, just overnight. Okay, so my mom's family pretty much disowned her, and as a result, we just didn't see them as much anymore. So I stopped going to visit my auntie over the summer, pretty much lost contact with a lot of my cousins. And then on my dad's side, they were all as supportive as they knew how to be, but we just became very busy. When it was the weekend, we would be visiting my mom, and so we missed a lot of the family gatherings and celebrations. Shortly after the breakup, my grandmother died, and one of my uncles died, and then an auntie died. So we had a lot of death in the family, which just meant our family structure really changed. Okay, so for me, school didn't change much. I was going every day, less involved, I was less active. I had less energy and less interest in being involved in school and the social activities. Church was another big loss for us. We basically, after a year or so, stopped attending church, and all those activities, holidays, celebrations, friendships, lunches after church, those dried up. Neighbors as well. There were some neighbors who stepped up and were really there for us in a really positive and wonderful way. But I noticed that once we weren't a family unit, somehow it didn't feel as comfortable to be going to the barbecues and the picnics and events with other families. And then of course there were some additions. So that's the other thing that you can add to your diagram. Not just what you lost, but what did you gain? Or what things were introduced into your life. Maybe you started going to daycare after school. Maybe there was a hobby. Maybe one of your parents started a relationship or got married again, and you had other people involved in your home life. My mom got remarried. Her husband had 5 kids. My dad had a few dating relationships, so there were people in and out of our lives. If you're a bit older when your parents break up, you might start having an after-school job or some different activities that you're involved in more, where it is natural to shift away from your family to some different relationships. So as you work on the second diagram, you just want to ask yourself which relationships changed and how did they change? If you want to, you can make notes alongside your roots of your diagram. There's different ways relationships can change. Some relationships are still loving and caring, they're just, you're not spending as much time together. Other relationships may have gone cold. There may be offense, anger, shame, and so on that make it difficult to connect with the different people in your life. And as I said, you can work on your second diagram for as long as you want. If your parent or parents remarried, maybe divorced again, or maybe you moved to a new city or country, and there was a significant change in your life, you could do a third diagram or a fourth. The goal of this exercise is that you would have the opportunity to reflect on and perhaps see clearly the changes that happened in your life when you were a child or teen after your parents broke up. And it's okay if your memory isn't perfect. You might not get the dates right or the details right or the names right, but what you're looking for is the general sense of how did you feel as a child? Did you feel supported, cared for, protected? Did you feel lonely, rejected, vulnerable, afraid? Probably some combination of all of those. One thing that stood out to me when I did this exercise was to just recognize that in this really difficult, painful time in my life, I actually had a lot less resources to draw on relationally than I had when my parents were together. And this is one of the hardest things, one of the tragedies and heartbreaks of a breakup, is that it doesn't just impact the marriage relationship and the immediate family, but it spreads throughout the whole social network. If you're finding yourself getting triggered, emotional, anxious, angry, it's totally normal. So if you need to pause this and go for a walk, have a cup of tea, go for a run, or just come back to it tomorrow, that's completely fine. But once you're ready to come back, the final step of this process would be to look at your 2 diagrams side by side, or as many as you have, and to simply make note of what things changed for you. What do you notice about the support structure in your life before and after the breakup? What stands out to you about the diagrams that you've drawn? What catches your attention or makes you go, didn't realize that? And finally, what feelings are you aware of? Perhaps as you drew it the first time, as you reflected, maybe in the time in between, you may have felt sadness or relief or anger or guilt. Maybe there's a sense of gratitude for the people who were consistent in your life for all these years. You may feel a sense of compassion for your younger self who went through so many losses and so many changes at such a young age. You may be curious about what actually happened in your childhood and want to talk to a sibling or an aunt, a relative, or a parent about some of the details of your past. No pressure to do that, but if you're curious and want to, sometimes it's helpful to hear from somebody who was slightly removed from the experience and can fill in some of the gaps that you might have in your memory. And if you'd like to talk to somebody in your life about what you've noticed, whether that's a sibling, a friend, a partner, or a relative, you might find it helpful to have a space to just process and explain. I hope this exercise and the video have been helpful to you. Perhaps it's given you some things to think about when you reflect on your childhood, your parents' breakup, and how that's impacted you. If you'd like to learn more about adult children of divorce and how to find healing and live connected lives, then please subscribe to this channel, follow me on social media. I've got a lot of content There are links below to my newsletter, and you can read the first chapter of my book, Come Home Laughing, a novel for adult children of divorce, for free.